Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Another week, Mark. Can you believe it?
Yes, I can believe it. It is good to talk to you. It's good to hang out with you at the close of this week, almost, and just kind of catch back up with what you're doing and talk something about what we've been exploring.
Yeah, it's always good to kind of catch up and I guess see what we're doing and see where it's going and see how it's doing. So I'll open up. What have you been working on?
I've been looking at a little bit more about what something called named entity recognition. Also, you could call it entity extraction. You could call it custom. What is it like a text? It's basically looking at text, unstructured text, and trying to figure out, this is a person, this is a place, this is a
Oh,
thing.
okay.
Yeah, it could be dates. I guess the kind of the corollary from from the voice world is like looking for slots, but you don't necessarily specify what the slots are. You've got something that's trained that figures out that, oh, this is a date, or this is a and you might have a situation where you're in a specific field and you want to figure out words, like highlight words that are you know in that area, so like legal terms or things like that. You might want to classify things separately, and so there might be a reason to do some custom entity um, recognition stuff. So I've just been kind of looking around at different tools in the Amazon world. That would be something like Amazon Comprehend. Also done some looking at, well, how do you do this if you were to, kind of from scratch? What's what approach? And that kind of led me down this whole rabbit hole with Hugging Face
Oh, okay.
and
So
Python libraries and all this stuff, and I was just like, whoa. And what's interesting about this is that I'm not a Python developer. I some occasionally, I guess, I've glanced at some Python code, but haven't really done it. And this whole area of machine learning kind of under the covers is new, and so you kind of find yourself, I have no real context. I'm really learning something from the ground up. And you're like, what do you do in that situation, right?
no, that is very, very familiar because some of what I've been doing this week is trying to start to wrap my head around how some of the LLMs are working.
Yeah.
Um, and then I guess a few weeks back, I discovered a tool called LangChain, which also is a Python library, which I'm not even sure, part of it was, again, I heard about it and everyone's saying, oh, this is great. This is the way to build applications on top of LLMs. It makes it so simple. I'm like, I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah.
Um, so I start reading it and I'm like, there must be more to this because this seems way too simple. No, why is there a library that does this? And in reading more and seeing examples, and fortunately there are some people out there that are willing to talk about the fundamentals, the
Mhm.
elements of what is this product and what is the technology, what is the technology and terminology underneath it. Because again, I think more than anything else, it's the terminology that you need to start wrapping your head around.
Yeah. I found that's true. You're just like, part of what makes it new is just new concepts, new words,
Right.
new phrases. But something I do want to point out, maybe kind of as we talk about, how do we tackle this? You already, I think, identified one of the things that I do too is I just find a code example. I go like right to the getting started, or um, and just start looking through, what's from a code perspective, how would I code this? How would I start one of these things up, whatever it is? How do I, what inputs does it need? What are my options for output? And so I can start to kind of put some boundaries around it. And it's just, I guess maybe the first boundary is, input, processing, output, kind of what's, try to figure out those three pieces and kind of go from there. I don't know. That seems like that's something you do too.
No, it's not usually.
Oh, okay.
Usually what I prefer to do when I tackle something is try to read and understand the terminology first. Because what I usually, when I start seeing the code, I just see a jumble of code and I stare at it and I go, I mean, obviously it works, but
yeah,
you're using terms and you're making calls that are magic to me. But once I get at least a little bit of the terminology, I can understand, oh, that's why you called this method chain. That's why this is a chain.
yeah.
That's why you call this a model, because a model has a meaning. So
Yeah.
once I get some of those terms, I can start reading the variables, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, and I guess I like attacking it just kind of from the code point of view, because then I'm usually like the getting started is as little lines of code as possible, and you're like, okay, I start trying to figure out that, and then I'm like, I think I do go back to what you're saying is like, oh, I hit this word. What does this word mean in this context? And so then I start to look around, usually right around in that area, or some documentation page, or try to find somebody that's written an article on it that kind of goes through the basics of it.
Well, and then you kind of reference the thing that I enjoy doing. Once I start reading the code, I like looking at a function. I'm like, okay, so what's the definition of this function? Where is this function documented to tell me what it does? So I'll go see, okay, because once I'm reading the code, I now want to make sure I understand it. I can get some understanding, but I'm like, okay, this function just did this. Does it take other parameters? Can it do other things?
Exactly.
You're showing it with a bunch of defaults, making a whole pile of assumptions. What are those assumptions? And once I start, even if I don't understand what my other options are, I'm now starting to get an inkling of what it takes to do this, what else I need to know and to factor in. Because if something, one of the examples, for example, that I ran into in LangChain is that it, kind of just says, oh, and you're going to need the API key. And I'm like, right, the API key. And where do I store that? And what, how is it getting into this function that needs it? So, once I start pulling those pieces out, I really feel like I don't understand what's going on yet, but I feel like I have a handle on how to find out what's going on and where it's going.
And if you look at a function and you're like, that's it, that is all the arguments, you're like, okay, you can kind of compartmentalize and say, okay, that's all this thing does, versus sometimes you see this option, it's got like 20 different options, and you're like, okay, whoa, this is something that's very flexible here, or has lots of different knobs that can be turned to customize it. So you kind of start feeling like this is a narrow path, this is a kind of a broad topic that you want to explore deeper.
Right. Well, that's it exactly. It's not just, oh, there are a lot of knobs. It's, well, okay, these knobs do something. What does that mean? What does temperature mean when we raise that question? What is a model name? What are the available model names? How do I find out what the available model names are? These, whereas before you go into it thinking, oh, I'm just, plugging in one thing and getting something back.
Yeah.
Now you start saying, oh, there are things that I need to know. How do I know what those are? And how do I know what good values are, and where this rabbit hole is clearly important? Where do I learn that information?
Yeah.
And I think that's important to understand. At least for me, it's important to understanding. One of the things that frustrates me when I do a hello world in any language is I'm just like, okay, you just made your language look really simple, and I know it's not. You haven't shown me any loops. I don't know how I'm reading from a file. There's a whole bunch of stuff that your hello world example is hiding under the covers. And until I find any of that out, I don't trust you.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you had to explore too much? I guess do you have experience in Python in the past? Have you had to explore some new that as a new language
Well,
recently?
so I got lucky. I had started reading up on all of this in Python, and I had started learning the terminology of everything through the Python documentation. And then they announced LangChain JavaScript for TypeScript.
Oh, interesting.
So
I'll have to look at that.
so I was able to say, okay, now I'll take all of this base information that I have and go look at the JavaScript documentation and apply it, which is good because the JavaScript documentation is very short on all of those explanations because it assumes you understand where you were coming from in the Python world.
Oh,
Because one of the reasons why all of this is in Python is that a lot of the AI experimentation and AI research and all of that's been done with Python in the past.
yeah.
But the reason why LangChain has created a JavaScript version is because more and more people are doing website work and web server work with Node using these AI tools. And Python's not a great language for that. So they're trying to create stuff that, has a similar feel on both platforms. So there isn't too much extra work they need to do. And some of the file formats will be the same between the two platforms. So there's less work they need to do. And we see where it goes from there. So I've started playing around with it a little bit in the JavaScript version, but I need to keep referring to the Python documentation to understand what it does.
Yeah.
And kind of read through the Python examples to see what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, this isn't exactly the same thing, but it is interesting when you hit something and you have a choice of languages. In some cases you just choose the language that you're familiar with. That's your predominantly. But I remember when I first switched over from Visual Basic, when .NET came out, you could choose your language. You could choose C#, or you could choose Visual Basic .NET. And originally I was thinking, oh, I'll just go with VB.NET. There's not, no reason why not to. It's, the same thing in the end. But I quickly realized that most, if not all, of the examples were in C#. And I had already had some experience. There's a number of different reasons why I wasn't like the typical Visual Basic programmer, but at that point I needed to decide. I just decided I was going to bite the bullet and learn C#, and very happy that I did. That was like the right choice from my perspective. But it is interesting, like with a library like this, where right now the JavaScript documentation isn't as well fleshed out, and may actually lag if the majority of people initially are using it with Python, then that might be where the documentation is. So you might end up having to learn enough Python to be able to understand the documentation, so you could figure out, okay, what's the equivalent in JavaScript. Or
well, and this also occurred to me today, is that we have a tool now that will help us that you didn't have back in your VBNet days. And that's that we have things like ChatGPT and Copilot, where we can just give it a chunk of code and say, what does this code do? Or translate this code into JavaScript or the equivalent, and not necessarily use it verbatim, but use that as a way to help understand what it is that the code is supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and funny enough, I've had some time to explore recently some new services on AWS, and I had asked somebody a question online. I think it was on Twitter, and it was taking a little while to get back to me. His post had triggered some question or thought that I had, so I asked a follow-up question, and then I didn't get an answer immediately, and I just happened to have ChatGPT open, so I asked the same question to ChatGPT, and I got an example, an answer, and part of that answer hinted at something, and I'm like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more. So I asked a follow-up question about that. So I started having this conversation about this AWS service and learning more about it, asking what its limitations were, asking about throughput, give me an example in either JavaScript or TypeScript, and it did. It happened to choose the AWS SDK version 2, and I said, could you give me that same example in AWS SDK for JavaScript version 3? And it did, and I was just like, holy cow, this is crazy.
Sometimes it works really well, and other times it works really poorly. I
don't know if the code's 100%.
Oh, I was doing something with SQL, and I was beating my head around it. And I finally gave the query that I know was running to ChatGPT and asked, how do I, what is this doing? And it gave me an almost correct answer, not quite correct. And I asked it, well, okay, how do I get it to do, this insert in this particular way? And it gave me a wrong answer. But in researching the wrong answer using real documentation, I found the right answer. So, I don't trust ChatGPT, not in the slightest.
Yeah.
But I trust
it. It's very confident in its answers.
It's really confident in its answers, which is why I don't trust it. But it usually gives me an answer that gives me some things to start with on Google.
Yeah.
And then 2 or 3 jumps later, I'll find what I'm actually looking for.
Well, and I've even experimented with can you give me some links of where I could find that information, of the thing I just talked. And so it gave me some links, and I found those links.
That worked.
Yeah.
Interesting, because usually it refuses to do links. And the last time it gave me a link, it gave me the wrong one.
Oh.
Like completely wrong. But anyway, obviously,
once again, it's been trained from years ago. It's got still old data, so nothing new is.
Yeah. This was a case where it was a question about something that was years old. It was well before its training data.
Oh, okay.
It should have known this one, and it got it wrong. And it pointed me to the wrong page for the wrong version. And I specified what version I wanted. And it pointed me to a fictitious page for that version. And I figured it out. It wasn't that it led me completely astray. It's just it was wrong. And it's wrong. Obviously, I'm interested enough in this technology that I'm, installing libraries in Python that I never thought I would do. And, playing around with it, that I'm trying. And I think it's important that we do try and experiment. But I think it's also important that we realize we're still better programmers than it is.
Oh yeah. I'm not worried about it taking my job yet. But I do see the usefulness of tools, because sometimes you need to understand, you're given a chunk of code, you need to understand it, or you need to do something that's similar but not quite something that you're looking at, and you just want to understand a new technology. There's lots of different areas. Like if there was some accurate training on AWS of all of its services documentation and samples, and there was like an AWS chat GPT that was just concentrated on that service and stuff, I probably would use it quite frequently.
Probably, but don't be so sure that it would be accurate.
Yeah, that's the thing. That would be the part that I would be hoping that if it was only trained on authorized AWS sources, that it would be more accurate, but that may be a faulty assumption.
Well, that's not how we're going to need to go in sometime about how LLMs work, because that's not how LLMs work.
Yeah.
LLMs work on word patterns. And if there are misleading word patterns that end up in there, it can very much lead you astray.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a friend of mine, Noble Ackerson, has just published an article actually about why LLMs are not sources for information. They are sources for good language patterns. And that's all they're good at. If they happen to hit on the truth, that's coincidental. It really is. And we need to make sure we understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, good word patterns are good. That's what we're doing in the voice field is, making sure we can turn the word patterns that a person is saying into something actionable and reply with word patterns that make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally kind of the fundamental of what we're doing in the voice world and in the chatbot world. So it's important stuff. But that doesn't make it a source of truth.
Yes, that is a true statement.
Yeah. I guess tying back to the how do we learn stuff, I think that's one of the important things about how we learn is that we do make mistakes, and we do look at things critically.
Yeah.
So we don't, say, oh, hey, this hello world, I can do it in one line. This language must be terse and clear and wonderful. Well, okay, that means you can make hello world, programs in one line. But how often do you make a hello world program?
Yeah, not very often.
What are the other things that we look at to evaluate a language for our needs?
Yeah.
And over time, we start to learn what are those things that are important for us.
So something else I do, and especially if it's something that's brand new context, is I try to make connections with other things that I know, and sometimes it's not, that's not there. You're learning something completely new, but sometimes you're like, oh, okay, I see that this is this, or like I've noticed, like in Comprehend, to train a custom, like a custom entity extractor, then you need to provide a training file that has sentences that include the words that you want to extract, and you need to provide a test file, and then you need to provide a list of entities and say, if this word or these two or three words together is classify that as a whatever, like a sport or I don't know, whatever, right? Whatever category you're going to classify it as, and you're like, well, that's okay, that's very interesting. And then you look at Hugging Face, and you're like, oh, a Hugging Face wants you to have a sentence that's already broken into tokens. So now you've got an array of string tokens for each of the different words that are in the sentence, and then you have an array of like numbers that represent what type of thing it is. 0 for don't classify this, and like 1 for sport. But then it's also like broken up into, like 2 could be, 1 could be sport when it's the very first word in a multi-word sport, and like, so a B sport and an I sport, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's how they do it underneath the covers. I wonder if that's really very similar, that basically Comprehend is either using a different approach or has just kind of put a fancier front end on the process, and at its core, it's kind of doing the same exact thing.
No, I agree. In fact, one of the things that's really good is when we can relate it to things that we have experience with, which is how you introduced the subject to begin with. You said this, this is like slots where we don't have defined slots.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I can wrap my head around that model.
Yeah.
Or
And that mental model might only get you so far, and you might have to modify your mental model after you learn some new things. Like, okay, well, it's not actually like that, or it's only like that in this situation, and then, but what about all these other things? And so, mental models, you want could kind of help you grasp and get things to a certain point, but then you have to realize that it might be a wrong mental model, or might only take you so far.
right, but in the same way, when we started working with voice, we had this notion of, what is an intent?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
an intent is a bunch of phrases and the function that it calls, right? Well,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
As
yeah,
you learn more, you're like, okay, yes, that includes an intent, but the intent isn't the function itself, it's the expression. And you have a handler that's attached to it. That's the function. And yes, it involves slots, but it's not just phrases, it's bigger things, because the phrases go into a training system and it can create its own phrases without you knowing it. So
yeah. Slots can be open or closed.
right,
They can, and
the more you understand, the more it all makes sense, but you're starting with a framework that you're building on. And
yeah,
I feel that the best libraries are the ones that give you that basic framework and let you build from there. Let you see, hey, these objects have other methods that let you do other stuff. But it doesn't completely break what you think you were doing.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I just thinking through different things. Some of the, I guess the thing that I was just thinking of is like part of trying to figure out is like, what would I do with this thing? Why is this
Yes.
important? Why was it created? What
Yes.
wasn't there that what problem does this solve? And trying to figure that out. Sometimes that takes some detective work, trying to figure out why does this thing even exist? Why don't I do it this other way? Or
No, that's a great point. I mean, one of the things with LangChain that I still wrestle with is, okay, LangChain has these things called chains. Clever name.
yep,
And on the surface, it sounds like a chain is just, we're going to take this one module and call it, and take the result of that and feed it into the next module, and take the results of that and feed it into the next module.
so like a pipeline.
Right. And I'm like, so is this a pipeline? Why is it literally just 3 lines in there that is call this, get the result, take it, and pass this?
Yeah,
Why does a chain exist? Why did somebody not just think that it was important enough to create, but important enough to name the package after it? And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, which is why I feel like I'm missing something crucial.
yeah.
Because my obvious solution is I should just be calling these APIs one after the other. What am I missing? And I've got to be missing something. But knowing that you're missing something helps you understand that you need to look for it.
Yeah.
As you said, why does this package exist? It's got to exist for a reason. Once you figure out that reason, it will make more sense. Everything will make more sense. Everything will suddenly fall into place.
Yeah. And you can say like, oh, this is very useful. I can see why this is, or like, oh, this was one approach that this person took, and it doesn't make sense for me. I like this. I prefer this other framework over here, or this other library instead, or something I want to create. It doesn't solve the problem the way that I wanted to, so I'm going to create something else, right?
Right. And that's an important thing to consider is, and that's, I think, one of the most important things is, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? In a lot of cases, we're just looking at technology for the sake of trying to understand it. But it needs to be there to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And as you said, what was the problem it was trying to solve when it was created? What was the problem the author of it was trying to solve? You know, when we talk about, for example, creating, when I talked about multivocal, for example, I would say the reason why multivocal existed is because the review team was making us do X and Y and Z, and it was getting kind of stupid that every time I would re-implement X and Y and Z. So I created a library that did X and Y and Z for me every single time, so I didn't have to implement it again. That's why we have libraries.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I need this thing solved. You go out and you take a look and try to find something that meets that need. Sometimes you find something that's perfect for it. Sometimes you find something that kind of partially solves it. And you're like, is this something I want to make modifications to or adapt?
Is it enough for me to build on top of?
Yeah,
you know,
or
does it
is this
fit into
something,
what I'm doing? Yeah.
Or is this something I just need to, create? And so that's partly why I do open source projects, and and sometimes I build something from scratch, like the Badgerific library. There were some solutions that kind of did it, but it didn't do exactly what I wanted to do, so I created my own. Other times it's like, I really like working on the Jovo framework, so I'll just create a plugin for Jovo to do that. Just this week, the BigQuery plugin that I created for Jovo was released.
Oh, fantastic.
So at some point we'll have to talk more about that.
I was gonna say we should talk about that another time.
Yeah, and some people are already excited about it, and there was like some final things that we needed to do as far as some modifications to the pull request, and somebody else jumped in and did it, and so I kind of feel like it's already kind of been a collaborative effort from the start.
Right. You know, that is one of the great things about in evaluating some of this stuff, is seeing, it's not just that there is a person driving it, although there usually is, but it's also that there is a community that is helping it along the way.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the other things that I feel like when I'm going and learning something is important to me, is if I can look at it and see, okay, it's not just that the author wrote something and put it into the package, it's that somebody else made a YouTube video, made a blog post, wrote their own documentation, wrote commentary about how they're using it, wrote their own samples and discussed those samples. Those are the signs to me of, that a product is worth looking at more. And these are the things that help me understand it better.
Right. Because you get somebody else's perspective on how it's being used. And that might, mesh a little bit more with the approach that you take, or explain it in a way that makes it clearer to you.
Right. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about your discoveries with entity extraction. And I'm very much I am hopeful that we get somebody from LangChain on here.
Oh, that would be awesome.
To really talk about it, because I've got a lot of questions, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. So hopefully we'll get somebody on here as a guest host at some point.
Yeah, that would be good. And we're excited about the things that you're working on too, or if maybe you're a little bit farther ahead of us on some of the things that we're researching or looking at, or have tips for videos to watch or other links or whatever. Just would love to hear from you on the types of stuff that you're learning and working on, and kind of how your approach to learning something completely new. Hopefully we've been a little bit helpful, and we'd be excited to learn from you as well.
And whatever you share with us, we are more than happy to talk about it another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark.